Howdy, and welcome back to another episode of Lane Change. We're joined today by Jon Ellison. Jon, welcome.
Thanks, Keith.
Glad to have you here. If you would, introduce our audience to yourself, a little bit about yourself. I know a lot about you, but for the folks who don't know you, give us your background and just sort of a story arc on your career.
Sure, yeah. I'm Jon Ellison. I'm actually a associate here at Rollo Insurance, but graduated Texas A&M 2017. Then I did 1 year master's program. I did the commercial banking program. It was Class 6 of the commercial banking program through Mays Business School, and started my career in commercial banking in Dallas. Actually loved the bank I was a part of. I have many great friends in that, but about 3 years in, which I'm sure we'll dive into some, we made a change, and I changed into primarily commercial insurance at that point. So that's my occupation. Then I have a wife and two little girls at home that I love dearly.
And you definitely married up, and you've got two beautiful children. So,
thank you.
You know, this is when I'm thinking through, people we want to have on to talk. You were on the top of the short list of folks that came to mind, because when we talk about a professional lane change, we talk about garnering perspective from our cumulative life experiences, right? Where you started out, for as great as that was, ultimately you were able to figure out it wasn't where you wanted to be. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about your mindset coming out of college, what you were looking for in a career, and then also follow that up with what aspects of that career began to weigh on you as you contemplated a possible professional lane change.
Sure, yeah. In fact, I had no intent of going into banking in the first place or insurance. My goal in life was law school, and I was taking the LSATs, and we were applying for law schools, but I was smart enough to intern at a law firm and realized before I went to the 3 years and a lot of money that it wasn't suits, right? It wasn't what I thought it
was not your calling.
Exactly. And so I was kind of at this crossroads and stumbled into the commercial banking program. And banking, from just the nuts and bolts of it, was fun. I love finance. I loved crunching the numbers. It was always fun to see what somebody was buying and kind of be in the know. But there was a few things with it that I just felt like it weren't my favorite. Part of it was, and there's going to be a lot of senior lenders that have been banking a long time that disagree with me on this because they got more experience. But for me, a lot of it came down to, at the end of the day, me and every one of my competitors were trying to give away $1 million, and it was, how much are we going to give it away for? And do you have to guarantee it or not? And how many months are your payments? That was, there are some very strategic lenders out there, but I was a lender at a community bank, right? It just doesn't get very creative. Sure. And where I started to wonder about insurance was actually banking in Dallas when a large tornado, $1 billion storm, went through Dallas. And we had clients calling in and asking, hey, I'm not going to be able to make my loan payment. I can't operate. My building's destroyed. And so my question always was like, don't you have insurance for that? And frankly, I didn't know. I mean, lenders don't know a thing about insurance. I had no idea. And they said, well, I don't know. And these were very sophisticated business clients. These weren't just, a lot of these people had master's degrees. They were leading large companies. And I realized they have no idea. And I could go to their income statement and I could see the line item for how much they're paying in insurance. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of shocked me that they're paying so much for a product and a service, and they have no idea
Didn't know what they didn't know.
Exactly. And so it just made me think there's got to be a better way. And frankly, I wasn't necessarily looking for a career change, but my wife and I were wanting to move somewhere smaller. We were in Dallas. We'd had our first kid. We were wanting to move somewhere smaller, and this is in the height of COVID. And so when we moved, banks were all on hiring freezes. And so I could not get a job at a bank, and I still had that experience and curiosity about commercial insurance. And so that's actually how I got into insurance. And then once I was in it, really figured out I loved it because how truly creative you can be in making sure policies are structured.
Isn't that interesting? Keeping with my metaphor here, there's a roadblock that prompted your lane change.
Right, yeah.
And yet it was the curiosity about things that you had observed in the process of going about that first career that you said, hey, look, this might be a better option.
Yeah, exactly. It was, it was an opportunity to still stay in the financial industry, still meet with the same types of clients I was currently meeting with and enjoying, but be able to really, I love to think deeply. I love to figure out problems, and I just felt like insurance offered an opportunity for me in that that I was not having in
Gotcha.
banking.
So it's interesting, again, you look at some of the predicates of some of these decisions, and sometimes it's the right organization, wrong position. In this case, maybe it was the right industry, if you paint that in a broad enough picture,
Sure.
financial services, but you were looking for a slightly different type of position, and that opened your first door in commercial insurance. Talk about that for just a minute.
Yeah, so I jumped into a group called Bailey Insurance in Waco. It was a commercial insurance group. So by commercial, I mean we weren't selling home and auto. I sold my own home and auto, and that was the extent of it. Everything else was calling on business owners and doing property and casualty insurance for business owners.
And again, it's breathtaking in insurance. Again, in that context, how much ignorance is in a pure sense of the word is very rampant. A lot of people don't know what they don't know.
Oh, exactly.
So you were at Bailey. Y'all had been there for a couple of years, and then the opportunity presented itself to again make one more lane change, not a mix master to a different direction, but again just one lane change over into more of an entrepreneurial role. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
So talk about how that went down and where you are now.
Yeah, so I loved Bailey Insurance, had great coworkers, phenomenal mentorship, really was enjoying insurance. But honestly, my wife and I's goal was always to get back to College Station. The reason we even went to Waco in the first place was separate from career. We had some friends planting a church, and we went to help with that. But we still had this desire to get back to College Station. And I was honestly strategizing ways to make that happen, thinking it'd be through Bailey. And then Keith had been reaching out. I'd kind of been, I don't know. So I hadn't really been following up. And finally, I told my wife, I said, if this Keith guy reaches out one more time, I'll answer it. And so I did. And I mean, you obviously know what happened from there. But we had lunch and had the opportunity to see the entrepreneurial side of things. Hey, I'm doing the same type of work, but I've got ownership and run the office. And as much as I love commercial insurance, and it's still what I love to primarily focus on, you have heavy peaks and valleys, right? You may have a really sizable client in June, and your July and August look really good, and then you may not have a big policy for several months. And so Rollo's model allowed me to do both commercial and personal, kind of balance out that income and have the entrepreneurial side of it. And
I'm not here to talk about Rollo. Again, you and I have talked about that. More emphasis on the mindsets, the challenges, the ambiguity. Talk, if you would, about any of those things, and or again, your reflections on moving from a corporate environment in banking to a family business environment with Bailey, which is a wonderful organization, into a entrepreneurial family type environment at Rollo. Just talk about the holistic things that, as you look back on where you started, where you are, it's not that you haven't had other opportunities, but you found your calling. What is it about this, and how have you, as you have reflected on your journey, what are the things that somebody sitting in the audience who maybe is in a similar or their version of your situation in the past, who's thinking about what could I do, where could I take my career?
Yeah.
Talk through some of those decision points for you and your family, and if you would, any other bits of advice that you would offer the audience.
Yeah, I think that for me, something, and I still have to coach myself on this daily, oftentimes freedom's on the other side of fear, right? There's a whole lot of fear leaving commercial banking in the first place, right? Like we're going from a stable salary at a bank that's been around for 150 years to straight commission, essentially in an industry that is similar but different, right? That I'm unproven in, and so there was a lot of fear making that jump, and then even more so making the jump from, hey, at least I have a recognized name and an employer, to I'm going out on my own, right? And so there was a lot of fear in all of those occasions, but man, the payoff and the freedom on the back end, and not just financially, also just, from the freedom of flexibility and time with my wife and time with my kids, and getting to call my own shots and do things how I want to do them. It's been really, really amazing experience.
And again, just in closing, as we wrap things up here, talk, if you would, about the calling aspect of using your God-given gifts and abilities in a way that blesses others. I know that you're a man of faith, and that you've got priorities. Talk about your ability in this calling of a career that you have selected? How do you weave all that together? And
Yeah.
how does that inspire you every day? What makes it worth it?
It's interesting because back to the kind of the story of the business owners in Dallas having no idea what their policy covered, and like you said, in a pure sense of ignorance, right? If in this field, I feel like I'm actually able to help people protect their assets in a sense that they don't know what they don't know, and I can go and be that advisor and show them this is what can be, this is where you're at now. Whereas in banking, and this again, not dogging on banking, I love banking, but at some level you kind of feel like you're just helping the rich get richer, right? It was like, you qualify for a $2 million loan, good for you. It's phenomenal. But here it's like whether that's a homeowner, sometimes it's a 70-year-old widow that's got a Social Security budget, and she's like, I don't want to get out of my house. How can I afford to stay in my house? So it's structuring her policy to her needs for that. Or sometimes it is a business owner that's wanting to grow tremendously, but wanting to protect their business and their legacy in that process, and getting to sit and advise them on, hey, how do we make sure that you build a legacy that's going to last and that you're going to be protected when bad things happen? And so that's really been what sustained me in insurance, because it's not always easy.
Right. And I love that about your heart. Again, I think the best insurance professional the best insurance professionals have an educator's heart. You're not trying to push a product. You're just trying to provide a consultation and a service and help them make the right decision. Right?
Absolutely.
And that doesn't sound like rocket science, yet there's an alarmingly small number of people who are able to sometimes, because of the structure of how much this industry is set up. Sometimes they're forced to have to push things, and you don't do that. That's not who you are. That's not the organization that you're a part of, and those are big things. Just in closing, talk to the audience. Somebody sitting out there, they're thinking about going down, they want to go down this path, but they're scared. They're overwhelmed. The question marks, they've never done it. What's the best advice you can give them? Close us out with that.
Best advice I could give you, I'll probably change my mind on that in a few minutes, but I guess off the cuff, what I think of is, I always think about what's the worst thing? Like, what is the absolute, that's how I get over my anxiety about things, is what's the absolute worst thing that can happen? 95% of things you can turn back. If insurance ever failed, I'm sure I could get a job as a banker somewhere, right? So if you're sitting at that spot and you're looking to make a lane change and you're really intrigued by it, I encourage you to sit and look at that and say, what is the absolute worst thing that could go wrong? And oftentimes you realize that's not an insurmountable hurdle, and that's carried me through a lot of the decisions I've made.
That's awesome. Well, that's Jon Ellison, folks. Thank you so much for taking time. Take care, God bless, and don't forget to take a long, hard look at that blinker.